Welcome to Nicholas Hood III Ministries, a ministry of hope, spiritual inspiration, personal power guided by Christian love. May the power of God's Holy Spirit fall upon you as you sit back and enjoy today's program. I introduce you now to Pastor Nicholas Hood III.
Today I'd like to talk about love and marriage. Love and marriage. Now, it's not just the married people who experience love. You can experience love in being single too. But I want to share with you what the Apostle Paul tells us really are the elements of love. And I'm specifically speaking not just to the married people, but the single people. And I would say that if you're single and you are asking yourself who's the right guy I should be with, or who's the right woman I should settle down with, I want you to think about these elements that I'm getting ready to give you. If you're already married, I have the same thing to say, which is if you're already married, you ought to think about these elements that Nick Hood is getting ready to say to you and ask yourself, are these the cornerstones of my marriage? And so here we go. From 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting at verse 4, listen to what the Apostle Paul says about love. This is the test, the real test as to whether or not love is a good love. He says love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous or boastful, envious or rude. Love does not insist on its own way, but rather love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will cease. But love never ends. And so that's where we go. And I think it's so interesting that when the Apostle Paul begins to break down love on a level that his audience in Corinth could really understand, he says that love is patient. Isn't that interesting? Paul doesn't say that love is loving. He doesn't say love is tender. He says love is patient. Think about that. I wonder why Paul is single. Why does a single man who's a preacher of the gospel say that love is patient as opposed to love is tender, love is romantic? He says love is patient. I think what Paul is trying to tell us is that if you are in a relationship with another person, a loving relationship, you got to learn patience. You got to learn patience because, one person wants to go, the other person wants to sit down. One person likes, the sitcoms on television. The other one wants to read books. You got to be patient with a person. One of the things I learned when I got married was, and I think I'm a pretty patient fellow, but one of the things I learned that was so interesting to me was that, my wife and I, before we got married, we didn't live together. We dated for 3 years, but there's a lot that you don't know about the other person until you actually live with them. And one of the things I learned is that my wife wasn't crazy about making the bed. But then one of the things she learned about me, and there are many, that, maybe I wasn't as neat as I wanted to be, or she wanted me to be. But for me, I was just a little surprised that she wasn't the first one up in the morning to want to make up the bed. And as it turned out, this was our first year of marriage. We had a little quarrel, and it didn't start as a quarrel. What it started with was a shutdown on my part. I had promised before we got married that I would take out the garbage and I would clean the bathrooms, including the toilets. I told her I'd been a maintenance man at the Medical Center Courts Apartments in Detroit, and I even knew how to unstop a toilet. I was adept at doing that. But I became so frustrated that she wouldn't make up the bed that I stopped taking out the garbage. I shut down. And she said one day, after about the third or fourth day, she said, what's up with the garbage? And I said, what's up with the bed? And it was on then. And she really knew what to say. She said, Nick, she said, now, what's it going to look like if, members of the church and other members of the community read the Michigan Council, the Michigan Chronicle. That's the black newspaper in Detroit. And they look at that and they say, Reverend and Mrs. Hood, pastor of a noted church, they're getting a divorce. And people are going to want to know, why are they getting a divorce? And she said, Nick, if we get a divorce, let it be over another woman or let it be over money. But how's it going to read in the Michigan Chronicle, Reverend and wife divorce over garbage? And I tell you, I fell out laughing. And guess what? I've been making up the bed ever since. That's a joke, but it's true. And I just shut up and I thought about it. I said, Nick, you got to pick your battles. And you have to learn how to be patient with one another. Because we don't all think at the same level. We don't all think at the same way. But if you love somebody, you're patient with them. And Paul goes on from there to say, love is patient. He says, love is kind. There are a lot of people who are loving, but they're not necessarily kind. There are people who will tell you, well, I love you, but they're so doggone mean at how they express their love. Makes you wonder, boy, if this is love, what does hate look like? Now, I'm going to be honest. I don't have that problem with my wife. I mean, she's loving. So I'm not here to say that she is not a loving person. She's a very loving person and very affectionate. But we have to be very careful. Those of you who are looking at this, you're trying to test your love to see, one, if you're dating, is this the right love for me? Or if you're already married, to ask yourself, how do I score my marriage, the quality of my marriage? One of those characteristics ought to be kindness. Paul doesn't say love is love. He says love is kind. And some people are brutal in their love. They're absolutely brutal in how they talk to one another, brutal in how they interact with one another. Some people are so doggone haughty. They're know-it-alls. Who wants to be around a know-it-all? Who wants to be around a haughty person? And Paul says, love is kind. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous, envious, or rude. He says all of this before saying love is tender. Some people are jealous, and it's very difficult to be happy if you are in a jealous relationship where your wife or your husband is always looking over their shoulder, wondering about the first boyfriend or the first girlfriend, or wondering about the lady that you work with or the man that you work with. If a person is jealous, you're never going to see their best side. Matter of fact, when you're around a jealous person, at least from my thinking, it seems like their face changes. And, where they're always imagining something and making things a lot worse than they really are. And I've come to the opinion that you don't really know the true depth and character of a person if they are jealous, because the jealousy will overtake them. And when jealousy overtakes a person, they can't see right. they can't think right. And they can't see and they can't think right because they don't feel right, because they're angry. And that anger comes from their insecurity, feeling like maybe I don't measure up to the next guy. Maybe I don't measure up to the next woman. Paul says love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious, jealous, or rude. Some people will love you, but they're so rude in their love. They are not pleasant people, not pleasant to be around. And what does a rude person look like? That's a person who always has to talk. The person who always has to have the last word. The person who is the know-it-all. Their opinion is greater than your opinion. You don't really measure up because they're the smartest person in the room. Have you ever been around the smartest person in the room? They are absolutely distasteful to have to be around. And sometimes, I'm with people who have decided they're the smartest one in the world. And I just listen to them. I just shut up and let them run their mouth because I feel like I can't get a word in edgewise. And what the persons like that don't realize is that they're making themselves seem distasteful and seem miserable. And in the context of a loving relationship, in the context of a marriage, in the context of simply just being around people, even in a work setting, if a person is rude to you, where they always have to have the last word, and sometimes not just wanting to have the last word, they want to be humiliating. There's some folk who are not happy until they humiliate you, until they say something to belittle you, to cut you down. They want to make you feel like you are less than a man, less than a woman. Paul is saying in 1 Corinthians 13 that if you have that kind of relationship, you're on the wrong track. He said that's not really the best kind of love. He says love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous, envious, resentful, or rude. He says love does not insist on its own way. Now, in the context of a marriage, in the context of having a good relationship with other people, if you or they decide that they always want to insist on their own way, think about what does that mean? To insist on your own way means that you know the best way. It means that if you're choosing a movie, and a man and a woman are trying to choose what movie to see, if one of the two of them is not happy unless they choose, both of them end up deciding to go to the same kind of movie, to see the same movie, then that's not really a perfect relationship. That at some point you have to be able to bite your tongue. At some point in a loving relationship, there ought to be an equal spirit. And what I mean by that equal spirit is that the man does not always go first. The woman does not always go last. My wife is a federal judge, and she invited me once. As a matter of fact, she's invited me several times to go to lunch with some of the foreign judges who've come to intern at her court. And so we went to lunch, and I think my wife asked me to go with her because I'll say things that she's just too judicial to say. And, so it's kind of like, well, Nick will say what I'm thinking, but I can't say it. So we took this one couple to lunch, and after we broke the ice, I asked the couple, I said, well, how do you find America? What do you find different here that you didn't see in Japan? And the woman spoke up first. And both of them are judges in the Japanese system. But the woman spoke up, she said, I like America because in America, the woman comes first. I said, excuse me? Say that again. I said, what do you mean by that? She said, well, like when you walk into a restaurant or into any building, she said, in our culture, the man always walks in first. And I looked at her husband's face, and he was not particularly happy about that. And at that point, I'm trying to change the conversation. I said, well, do you think that's because symbolically, with a man going into the building first or into the restaurant first, it symbolizes that he's protecting you? She said, no. He goes in first because he thinks he's better. I said, whoa. And at that point, I looked at them and I said, would you like to have some calamari? I said, maybe we should try something. Anything I could do to change the subject. But I encourage you, if you're in a loving relationship or you're looking forward to building a loving relationship, I encourage you to read 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 to 8, and ask yourself, does my love meet up to this standard? Or am I one of those people who always has to have their own way? So think about it. I have two really exciting guests who are going to be with me in just a minute. So I want you to stick around. We have Dr. Crystal Woods Ollier and her husband, Adam Ollier. And they're a young couple. They're in my church. Crystal Woods Ollier is a psychologist, PhD psychologist. And her husband, Adam, is just an all-around great guy. And Crystal has been on this program before, but today, because we're talking about love and the different components of love, I asked Adam if he would join her and be with us. So stick around. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and His power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out.
Thanks for joining us in this segment. I've been talking about love and marriage, and today I have a real-life example of a young couple in my church. And I've asked them to join me on the show to talk about love and marriage. I have Dr. Crystal Woods Ollier, who is a PhD psychologist. She runs a health care clinic, or what is it? How would you describe it?
We describe it as an outpatient behavioral health clinic that has therapists and prescribing providers serving the state of Michigan. So I am their director in Metro Detroit.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And tonight, Dr. Woods Ollier has been on this program before, this show, but because we're talking about love and marriage, I invited her husband, Adam Ollier, to be with us today. And Adam's quite a guy in his own right. He's a former state senator. He is a faculty member at Wayne State University and a captain in the United States Army Reserves.
That's correct.
So, what are your thoughts about what I just said, just quoting from the Apostle Paul, 1 Corinthians 13, starting at verse 4, love is patient and kind, love is not jealous or boastful, envious, resentful or rude. It does not insist on its own way, but rather love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. So the two of you are married. Matter of fact, I performed your wedding.
Yes,
And how many years have you been married?
13.
13 years. So what's your take on what the Apostle Paul says about the elements of love? And let's do ladies first.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's a pretty good blueprint. It is
definitely a tall order, so he's definitely listing some challenging things. But I do think they are a good source of ingredients to make a healthy relationship, whether that is a husband-wife relationship or how you interact with your children or other family members or, God's love for the church. There are so many ways that love can fit. And I think it's aspirational. It's kind of one of those things that you would be trying to work towards perfection on each day, like needing to remind yourself, like, okay, let me deny myself in this way a bit, and let me respond in a way that demonstrates love in these host of amazing ways and attributes each day.
Adam, what are your thoughts about what Paul says about this test for love?
It's interesting to think about it in that way. My dad gave me probably the best advice I've gotten about marriage in this space. I said, Dad, how'd you know that mom was the right person? And he said, a lot of people think that your partner's supposed to make you happy. And he's like, they're fools. Every day, your mom and I decide that we're going to be happy, and we're going to be happy together. And as long as we keep making that decision, we're going to be fine. And I think what the apostle was trying to say is that love isn't the thing that you see in a storybook or in a comic book. It's that activity that you do every day. It's those decisions that you make. And it is all the things that life is, because when you talk about somebody that you love, you're not talking about, a storybook. You're talking about a person that you make a decision to be with every day and to support them through all the things that they have to go through, whether it's the easy stuff, the hard stuff, the in-between stuff. And I think probably the biggest things are the stuff that you would never have thought that you had to deal with, because the two of you are growing together.
Well, the two of you know that my wife has been dealing with a health challenge, and the good news is she's, coming through it, and I think she's in the final stages of her recovery. But I told her several months ago when she was having a low moment about, just the pace of her recovery. I said, Denise, I commit to you this day that I promise not to make any jerk moves. And she fell out laughing. I said, no, really. I said, I'm serious. I promise to you not to be a jerk, that I'm going to help you get through this. And it's kind of interesting for me because we're in our 48th year of marriage this August. And I don't know why I uttered those words out of my mouth at this point in our marriage, because neither of us have had a health challenge like this, before. But everybody, I think has their different take on it. What would the two of you add to what Paul says about what love really is? Now, I think your dad's advice is exceptional. Are there any things that you've seen in 13 years of marriage? Now you have two children. How old are they?
6 and 3.
6 and 3. Mm-hmm. So what might you add?
I think the idea that love is sacrifice, love is compromise. As I think about my children, love is a risk. So I think I've heard the phrase said, having children is like your heart growing legs and somehow walking about on earth without outside of your body. And so the idea that you feel so attached to them, you want to protect them, but also giving them the space to move and grow. I think for Adam and I, a big thing is that love has been empowering as well. Even with its challenges, it's been empowering. Each of us empowering the other to move forward on the goals, some of which we had even before the two of us met or before the two of us were together, and also the goals that we have come to individually and together since our marriage. I always say that if you ever want someone if you're ever teetering on acting on something, want someone to push you off a cliff, call Adam. Like he will help to push you to action. And so that is one way.
And push you in a good way.
Yes, in a good way.
He's not going to push you over the cliff.
Exactly. This is something you say you want to do, but you've been hesitant. You've been hesitant. You have been going back and forth on, oh, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And saying, no, you can do this. Putting that battery in your back and saying, no, you've got this. Kind of encouraging you in that way, and also helping you chart a path for, okay, what would it look like to do this thing that maybe is a bit scary, but that is part of your goals and what you want to do. So that's a personal weakness of mine. And I would like to think that there are some, weaknesses of his where I am able to offer that piece as well, and that each of us is empowered and able to grow with each other, with the love that we pour into one another.
Dr. Crystal Woods, I cannot imagine you having any weaknesses. I don't see a weak bone in your body, not even your little pinky finger. I can't imagine that.
I try to hide them as they can. They do abound. And we can even think of them as areas for growth or improvement. And because we both believe very strongly in like a growth mindset, that we always want to be continually learning and growing and stretching. And we try to push each other in that way.
Adam, we only have about 30 seconds left, but anything you would add?
I would say that love is growth, right? I think relationships work when we grow together and not apart, right? And that's what I think Crystal and I have become. I am the person I am today because the best parts of me have gotten better because Crystal's encouraged me to do so. And the moments where it is at the strangest and the worst, she's helped me get up and do the things that I need to do. So I've been super grateful for a partner like her. And I think when people think about love, the way it works is when you two are both walking down a long path, and though it meanders and changes, you know that down the line, that's where you want to be, and you're holding hands as you go.
Well, Crystal, Dr. Crystal, and Adam Ollier, Dr. Crystal Woods Ollier and Adam Ollier, I thank you so much for being on my program today. It's been illuminating. I love it hearing from young people who are in love, and it's been a pleasure for me as a pastor of a church to watch the two of you evolve. And God only knows, where the end and what the end will be, but I trust, hope, and pray it will be in a good way. So thanks so much for being with me. And Adam, thank you. And for those who watching this in the Detroit area, even it's national, Dr. Woods, tell us, what's the name of your health care organization?
Yes. So I am a director at Life Stands Health, an outpatient behavioral health clinic, which offers therapy services and also psychiatric services to the state. And if you are in need of mental health services, you can reach us at area code 734-259-0000. Please reach out if you need it.
All right, folks, I hope this program on love and marriage has been good for you. And I hope that you will tune in next week, every week. I promise you to have exciting, very thought-provoking topics in the name of Jesus Christ. God bless, God keep you, and remember, I'm praying for you.
Thank you for watching today's program. We hope you've been blessed in a powerful way. Just knowing you took the time to watch today's broadcast is a great encouragement to Pastor Nick Hood. If this broadcast has been a blessing to you, we ask that you mail a tax-free donation to Nicholas Hood Ministries at 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.